Hello, hello. If I can ask everybody to take your seats, and we're going to start our panel now about digital equity and technology and how emerging technologies and advocacy go hand in hand to close the digital divide. And I'll pass to our host, Ross Patel, that will have the panel with us. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ross Platel, and I work here in the Smart Cities group on digital equity, and I'll be hosting the panel for today. Just to get people introduced, if I could ask the panelists to introduce yourself with your name and why you became invested in the role that you currently play in the digital equity community.
Thanks, Ross. We have one mic, so we're going to do a mic pass. I'm Erin Rutan. I am on the Smart Cities team. I'm a project manager, and I was actually brought into this team to build our digital equity strategy for Calgary. But really, my investment in digital equity started before my role, and it's how I came to be in this role. I actually got into this work I want to say 2008. I was actually working with Frontier College, implementing some art curriculum on reserves in Northern Ontario, and got to live the challenge that is being in an unconnected community. So no internet access, no phones, one single payphone for the community. And so trying to get information, deliver information became very challenging. And it was an eye-opening experience for me that really shifted the work that I wanted to do and how my career path moved. So I'm so excited that municipalities are now catching up to understanding some of these challenges that our communities are facing.
Hi, I'm Eric Lengner. I'm the co-founder and CEO of an international organization called Information Equity Initiative. I've worked in public broadcasting for 20 years, so I've always loved kind of the romantic side of broadcasting, where you can get really great content to as many people as possible and it's free. And so we started this organization a few years ago using a technology that can ride on that same path to get curated content to places that don't have internet. So it's using the same infrastructure, it's just kind of doing it in a much more personalized way for people that don't have internet.
Hi everybody, my name is Katharina Koch and I work at the School of Public Policy at the University of Calgary. I started working on the digital divide from an academic perspective in 2020, because this is when sort of the digital divide and all these issues really also entered the public discourse, of course, during the pandemic. And then we published some research on the digital divide and what is happening, of course, as a result of the pandemic. But the digital divide is, of course, already an issue since at least 2 decades. And yeah, it's still an issue. And so, of course, academics are working on that. And yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Well, thank you. My name is Savera Hayat, and I'm the Director of Community Strategies at United Way of Calgary. And like my colleagues who've spoken before me, my journey with digital equity started a while ago. I worked in international development and in higher education before I started working at United Way, and I found that working internationally across many communities around the world, I found that when technology was accessible and it was relevant, we could really amplify the investments in the community and make the world a much more equitable and inclusive place for everyone. And so at United Way, as you know, we're contributing towards a community where everyone can belong and thrive. And as part of my work, the strategies that I oversee are equity and inclusion, mental health strategy, digital equity, grassroots, and a couple of others. And all across them, I find that when we work on digital equity, we can really focus on transformation of the sector and on making sure that there is a lot more opportunities for people. So yeah, that was the origin story and how I'm here. Thanks.
Thanks.
Hi everyone, my name is Chase Castelny. I am an IT project manager within Smart Cities, also leading a lot of kind of AR, VR initiatives with the city. What really kind of got me involved actually was my colleague Erin. She kind of pulled me in. What really kind of caught my interest, where I kind of wanted to loop a lot of the work that I do with digital equity, was also speaking with our fine folks here at Humber, was to see if we could maybe bring some new technology like AR, VR to like marginalized communities that don't have access to new technology because of lack of internet access or things of that nature. So trying to see if I can work and bring some of this new technology into those communities that previously don't have access to it, and be able to bring benefits to those areas.
Thank you, everybody, for providing your introductions and a bit of background. It's great to see people coming from all different aspects to address the digital divide. Just moving into our second question here and diving in a little bit more deeper into the content of what you might have to say. Is there anything that has surprised you or shocked you working on the digital divide, or about the digital transformation movement in general? I'm just going to pass it down our panel again.
Should I go first, friends? Yeah. I would say, so what actually really surprised me was more in having conversations was just some of the assumptions that the general public tend to make. Things like, oh, well, doesn't everybody just have, I don't have a phone. Doesn't everybody just have the internet? Like, I just use my phone. If I need to see something, I Google it. It's like, okay, so how do you connect? And sort of getting what the baseline understanding of what the digital divide is quite poor. So to be able to, or to have those conversations continually that, no, well, your phone actually only connects because you have a data plan with your phone, or you're attached to Wi-Fi. What if you didn't have that device? And even bringing people back to navigation. So you rely on your phone for a map. Well, what if you don't have a phone? What if your phone is broken? What if you're traveling? How will you find your way around a new place? And so just bringing that level of understanding that not everybody has access to these things so readily at their fingertips, to really explain the scope, or to give a picture of what the scope of the digital divide is. That's the thing that I found most surprising. Anyone else? We don't have to go in a row. Okay.
Thank you. Well, I think I come here from a bit of also a unique perspective, because I did my PhD in Finland, and I don't know if you know Oulu or the University of Oulu, but it is one of the, it's kind of a leader in mobile tech, and even already in 2014 we had like an 5G intranet. They are now working on 6G, and also like in Finland itself, it's so, like the telecom and mobile technology, it's so advanced. And so you can be in a national park in the Arctic, and I still had access to 4G at the time. Now it would be 5G. And even like in terms of accessibility, like I paid $50 for unlimited calls, 100 gigabytes data, and people are just using their mobile phone literally for everything. And so I came to Canada in 2019, and I had to shift a little bit. And probably that was then also one of the reasons why I started getting interested in the digital divide. And then I worked with the city of Calgary on a literature review, a systematic literature review that was led by Dr. Turin Chowdhury at the Cummings School of Medicine. And we helped, this literature review informed the city's strategy, digital equity strategy. And so it is indeed extremely rewarding to see that, okay, like this is a topic that has to be talked about, and municipalities are tackling it.
Yeah, so for myself, I think similar to what Erin mentioned earlier, I mean, I'm brand new to kind of the digital equity world, if you will. So I guess the thing that kind of did kind of shock me was, you know, with technology where it is today, just realizing that there are a wide amount of marginalized communities that don't have access to this technology kind of shocked me that, you know, technology is everywhere, but a lot of folks don't have access to it. When it kind of comes to like the digital transformation lens, kind of one of the biggest challenges that kind of caught me off guard was like the adoption challenges that come with it. So changing people's mindsets and getting that buy-in is sometimes as challenging as actually bridging like the physical gap of technology. So that's been kind of the part that I found sometimes challenging and a bit shocking at times as well.
Well, thank you for mentioning that, because I found that too, that since the start of COVID-19, there were a couple of contradictions in how with the fast rate of technology that was coming towards us and the ability for us to be able to adopt to that change. At the time when COVID started, I was working at the University of Calgary in the international office. So all of a sudden, our global work went from traveling across the world to being online, and also we had to move a lot of our educational programs online. At the university, we were well prepared to do it. There were technologies available to do that. So that was interesting when we were ready, but globally we had partners who were at a different level of readiness. Around the same time, I was also volunteering for an organization I was on board of that was working in Afghanistan on girls' education. And during the past few years, as you know, girls' education has been curtailed in the country. So there was a program that we were focusing on, which was around online classrooms, which was on the back burner. But as soon as the Taliban took over the country, we put that foot on the front burner because that was the only way we could do this work. And then when I moved to United Way about 18 months ago and I was introduced the idea of digital equity, I was like, yeah, you know what? We're not ready. There is a lot of contradiction, and there's a lot of technology out there. So my biggest surprise was how uneven and unequal the space was. So thanks.
The only thing I might add is when we think, so we're partnered with Sesame Workshop, and the folks I work with there always say, if you can't reach, you can't teach. And so we approach this very much from a, what is the cheapest, easiest way to get high quality content to people who don't otherwise have access to it. Of course, we'd love if everyone had broadband, but we also recognize that it's highly unlikely for many, many years or decades for many people around the world. So we've been approaching this from a perspective of how do we use the infrastructure, whether it's broadcast or satellite that exists, to inexpensively get curated content to places that need it. And what's been eye-opening for me is just the level of need that exists really everywhere. We're based in the U.S., but everywhere we look, it's really just almost feels unsolvable from a broadband connectivity perspective, either usually because of cost. So I think it's really a combination of is it connectivity, which is a great goal, or can we just at least reach the folks that we're trying to serve?
Yeah, thank you, everybody. It seems like people have come at this from different angles and different experiences and at different times. And it seems like with digital equity, it's always a constantly moving target. So as we're developing new technology, we're needing to understand how that's really impacting people. And when most people talk about technology, the focus is predominantly in the tech space on the new smartphone or AI or self-driving cars or robotics. But there's a lot more than that. You were touching on the communication and the information side, and that gets overlooked quite often. And there are those tools that help our devices stay connected that end up being unseen quite often. But that also connects to how we were mentioning there's the exchange of information, but that also ties into policies and how the technology is used. And sometimes there's precedent set by either new technologies or policies that are in place. And those play a role as well within that affordability aspect for the technology. Just thinking about that, what's something that you would like people to be aware of or understand or even be able to advocate for in more of the public space? Who would like to pick up the mic next?
Thank you. So I have mentioned earlier that as the Director of Community Strategies at United Way, I'm also working on local social sector and its capacity development and advocacy around it. What we've seen over the past couple of years is that with the rapid rise in technology and access to services through technology, the private sector is ready, and it is on, it is on its path forward on that. But where we're seeing the gap is that the social sector is not ready, and that's the part that we really need to focus on, because the social sector actually delivers a lot of the services to vulnerable Calgarians. And the areas where I find on a day-to-day basis where we need to step up our game a little bit within the social sector and as supporters of the social sector is, for example, how information can be shared, how there could be cybersecurity efforts to safeguard the data, and how can we improve service delivery and accessibility of service delivery and opportunities to collaborate with each other. So this is where United Way's commitment to digital equity comes in as part of our diversity, equity, inclusion strategy. So so that was my thing. Who wants to go next?
Yeah, I can. Related to that, I think it's really important that we make sure that we that we take everybody with us in a way. So in research, we are talking about the 3 levels of the digital divide. The one is like access to the infrastructure, and then you have education, and then how do you use actually the internet? Like, can you use it for your own benefit, for example? And so what we are seeing is that tech is moving extremely fast, and the private sector is right on it. Like, you see all these amazing technologies here. It's amazing. But then at the same time, we also always have to keep in mind the equity deserving groups and vulnerable groups that also have sometimes compounding vulnerabilities. So for example, take a single parent, let's say, in a low income group. It might also be a female or a woman identifying person. And so we are in our literature, we found all these different groups that might have certain challenges in like accessing the internet, like related to affordability, education, and then also you can have these layers of vulnerabilities and these compounding effects like on top of each other. And so it's a huge challenge, but all these technologies and also policy, which unfortunately moves very slow in comparison to the tech sector, we have to try to take all of these vulnerabilities into account and make sure that, we catch all people.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. I think a couple things that we should kind of keep in mind as technology shifts. Like one of them would be that as we kind of provide this technology to these communities, we need to really make sure that it's really focused on like human-centric design and inclusivity. So we want to make sure that this technology is empowering people, not alienating people based on socioeconomic status, like age, ability, things like that. Also, when it comes to new technology, as I'm sure a lot of people are aware, like as technology evolves, more and more data is continually being collected. So we need to make sure that we're being transparent with how we're using the technology, take things into account like privacy, security, ethical considerations, and be fully transparent with that stuff as well.
With the work we're doing, what's becoming very clear is how important it is that when we think about the content and the experience, to speak of human-centered design, that we're meeting our users or our students kind of where they are. So when we work inside of an incarceration facility, the grade level of reading is often far below what that person's age might be, and there's often some learning disabilities or dyslexia. So it's really thinking about what content is appropriate, and then what actual equipment exists for them to use. Can they open up the file that's being sent, right? And so there's a lot of assumptions that folks who are connected have in terms of how the technology works, how fast it is, how proficient one is when using it. A lot of that stuff just kind of needs to be thrown out the window when dealing with folks who haven't historically had access to the technology in terms of how to kind of start to ramp them up so that there's a catch-up phase.
I'm so glad that you brought up that those assumptions need to be thrown out the window, because I think, again, we're so entrenched in technology, the majority of us in our day-to-day lives, that we forget about what it was like to not use an iPhone all the time, or a smartphone. I'm not going to assume you all use iPhones. And sometimes that learning, the accessibility piece isn't just, I've given you a computer, or I've given you a smartphone, and now you're connected. There's an education piece that really needs to go along with that. And there's also like big A accessibility in terms of content. So you can provide people with a device and an internet connection, but if the websites that they're trying to use or the information that they're trying to get isn't in plain language, if there's a lot of jargon, they may not understand it. If they're non-English speakers and you can't translate, if things are behind a lock screen, they may not be able to use translation tools. Translation tools also don't work when there's a lot of jargon. Things get lost in translation, quite literally. So there's other pieces that come along with the shift of technology that are brilliant engineers and implementers may not necessarily be thinking about when they're rolling out a tech, and even when best intentions are there to help solve a problem, if these things aren't actually truly accessible and using human-centered design, they won't be useful, and they'll just serve to increase the digital divide rather than reduce it.
Thank you, everybody. I'm going to open it up just if anyone in the audience wants to ask any questions of our panelists. I already see a hand up there. Thank you, Luis.
Thanks. So I just had a kind of question for all the panelists. I'm just kind of curious in the context of us all being here in the technology center. Do you see the rapid pace of technology advancements, in fact, compounding the digital divide instead of creating benefits? So is it like creating a moving target that is difficult to catch up to?
Yes. Yeah. Thanks, Peter. Yes, and. So there is huge potential, and I think Eric did a really great job this morning at highlighting some of the potential we see with broadcast technology to help reduce the digital divide. However, as with anything, if we just simply roll things out and don't consider the folks that are underconnected, we will increase the divide. If we're giving everybody VR headsets, or now everything's in VR, but what about people who don't have a headset? What about people who have a headset and don't have an internet connection? What about people who have a headset and an internet connection but don't know how to turn the headset on because they've never seen one before? So there's all these pieces. We need to, I think, Katarina, did you say we need to bring people along with us? So we don't want to be forcing things down folks' throats or making changes for people. We want to be doing it with people and with our community. And that's really what our digital equity strategy focuses on, is building and bridging the divide with our community and bringing people along with us and telling them why we're doing things and explaining the importance of some of these pieces that we're trying to roll out. Why are we giving you a computer? We're not just handing you a computer, we're helping you learn to use it. We're providing you with support if you need it, and hopefully some later educational pieces that go alongside. But it could go either way. And we really need to be mindful when we're implementing new technology and leveraging it that we're solving the right problem. And while smart cities, we're sort of technology first, but we're not technology only, right? We're still focusing on people and our community and making sure that when we are leveraging technology, we're doing it for the right reasons and we're solving the right problems.
Yeah, that's really an excellent question. I totally echo what you are saying. And when I'm thinking of all these new emerging technologies, like especially also now with AI, I mean, AI potentially, I mean, it's so powerful. And even the experts themselves probably even don't know like all the capabilities that we will be having in like the next 5 to 10 years. So how can a layperson even relate to that? And then, yeah, maybe what we do is like put questions into ChatGPT, and we don't even know, what are the implications of that. And we have sometimes people, unfortunately, putting personal data and so on, because there's also not enough of an understanding of how powerful these technologies are. So I think it also goes really into this second and third level of the digital divide, so how we are using these technologies. And I think in this moment, it's very easy to lose people because we just don't all have the expertise. We are not all, like, I look at this quantum technology and it's amazing. I might have a sense of what it could be used for, like securing banking information. I think that might be one of the applicabilities. However, I'm definitely not an expert in quantum, and so it's exciting. But yeah, we really have to make sure that, this might also really relate to policy, that policy really catches up and becomes flexible and nimble and really responds to these new technologies, and not like, okay, we have AI out there, and then 5 years later we finally have, let's say, a policy strategy of how students can use AI during their studies. Like, the universities, for example, because I come from that environment, we have to move really fast and give, guidelines to our students, and in the same way also to constituents. Anybody else?
We're so good.
There's a question.
Oh, yeah.
Hello, my name is Sarah. I'm a fourth-year marketing student at Mount Royal University, and I minor in entrepreneurship and social innovation as well. I just wanted to know, what type of implementational steps do you think students can have to align with the strategy goals of inclusion, for the city?
Well, thank you for your question. It reminds me of the time when I worked at the university, and also now that where I'm at United Way, we do have practicum students from Mount Royal, and we do engage in research projects with them. And so I was thinking, wow, that's a really cool question for a research project. I would say is that in some of my sort of conversation the last couple of years, I've found that young people, youth, university students, high school students, they're far more advanced in their knowledge around technology. They are adapting to technology far quicker than maybe someone who's not had exposure to a cell phone or an app before. So, being that connector in the community, making sure that people around us are aware of the technology that we can use. So, use your power of understanding of technology and the advancements in it to help create greater knowledge in the community might be one way to do this. And also looking at ways how technology can be used in ethical ways. So that would be another thing that I might encourage people to look at if they're looking at maybe a research project. So there are a couple of things I thought about. Thanks.
You said marketing, right? Yeah. So if I'm thinking of from a marketing perspective, again, if we're considering technology and some of the great tools like QR codes that you can use flashy new things, remember that not everybody has the devices that they need to connect with and use those tools. So a QR code works really well if you have a phone with a data plan that you can scan. There's really cool, I'm looking at you, Ross, because I think we talked about some of these, but there's some really cool, I think like in DigiTrails did some, you can embedded smart tech into murals. And so if you are scanning a mural with your phone, more things pop up. It looks 3D, it gives you information. But again, those things are accessible with a device that's connected to the internet. Fantastic tools, great way to teach people about new things, and a really cool marketing technique, but it isn't accessible to everybody. So things that we need to keep in mind while we're using some of these great new tech tools, what are we doing to help support folks that can't access them. So is there something underneath the QR code that tells you what you'd see if you scan it? Things like that.
Maybe just to add also from a student perspective, so for example, I'm actually not aware if the university has some sort of digital equity strategy itself, because of course we have students, you know, like the expectation is that, oh, everybody has their laptop or whatever. Maybe that's actually not the case. Maybe you indeed have students who, you know, they are working on a really old machine, if at all, and does the university and do lecturers and faculty take that into account in their classrooms? So what you mentioned with the student project, I think this would actually be really an excellent idea. For example, in our Master of Public Policy program, we had a capstone project just wrapping up this year. It had nothing to do with the digital divide, but just as an example, it was looking at a wellness strategy for student athletes who are, you know, competing in the Olympics and training and having lots of course, like they have their university studies, but at the same time, they have a very rigorous training schedule to be able to compete. And so this student, for her capstone, actually, for her master degree, was looking and working with the university of developing such a strategy. So maybe it could be actually an idea for a capstone or something similar as well.
Just like a fun little anecdote. So I have a friend who's working at both MRU and U of C, and a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago maybe now, was grading papers and did get one paper turned in that was handwritten. So the expectation was that everything would come online, but they did receive a handwritten paper.
So this question actually came to me when you talked about if you can't reach, you can't teach, but then it kind of tied in a little bit more with the marketing as well. How do you suggest we reach people with tactics that worked well? So are there tactics that work better than others for engaging equity-deserving populations? And this might be more on the business side, and maybe what failed? What did you think was going to work and that didn't hit the mark?
So in terms of engaging with folks that are hard to reach, so many of you don't know, well, some of you know, many of you don't. I worked in public engagement for a few years here at the city. And things that worked really well with us in terms of reaching marginalized communities was meeting them where they're at. So going into the community, going into a space where people tended to meet anyways, or gather, to make it easy. And sometimes that looked like a public park, that we got a large tent and heaters, providing food and incentive to have people come and have a conversation with you or come learn from you, rather than just assuming that they should give you their time, giving them a reason to give you their time. So sometimes that looks like paying folks for their time. Sometimes that looks like feeding folks for their time. And similarly with doing engagement for the digital equity strategy, we went into places like the Kirby Center, the Women's Center. We had conversations over meals. So we provide food, often child minding, depending on the group that you're working with. If they don't have someone to watch their kids, they may not be able to come and participate. So if you can arrange to have child minding as part of your engagement in your sessions with folks, that can be a huge reduction in barrier. And again, language. So if you can deliver the content or have the conversations in the group's primary language, that will really help you be able to connect with folks.
So some of the lessons and failures that we've learned from, hopefully quickly, when we first launched a few years ago, we were always going to decentralize the curation, but we were also creating libraries of content, whether it was from Khan Academy or Sesame Workshop. And, but we realized very quickly we're just not equipped to anticipate what are the content needs of folks all over the world. And one example, we were working within an incarceration facility. We had this whole library of Khan Academy content ready to go. And one of the lessons was how to build a small motor, which we thought was very useful, but the warden very quickly shut us down because that motor could be used to build a tattoo gun, which was not something that they wanted. So, you know, it just contextually, we had no experience or reason to know that, and so we kind of fell on our face. So very quickly, we've kind of shut down any, like we are making content available, but we're not, it's always local for the folks that know the constituents they're working with. And the only other thing I'd mention is, and this gets to the devices and the equipment, how important the training is. And what we focus on is train the trainers. So whether it's a public health officer or an educator, so that when they talk to the students or the expecting mothers or whoever it is, that they know exactly in plain, whatever the language is, here are the steps, here's who you can call if you have a question, because we found that we were assuming things that we shouldn't have assumed, and we learned very quickly that we were assuming far more than we should have, right?
Just two things. One is that in some of the work that we do with marginalized communities, we find that platforms that people are already on, it's easier for them to connect to their networks and their social networks on those platforms like WhatsApp. So if they have a WhatsApp group, use that WhatsApp group to share content rather than try to create another platform. 2 years ago, I also did some research project for a very large network here in Canada on digital platforms for creating partnerships. And the biggest concern that I came across was multiple logins. People don't want multiple logins, so we put that in the report. So use something that everybody's using and then craft your content for that particular platform. So some of the things. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thanks. I was wondering if the panel could speak to, like just in the Calgary context, what do you think are the greatest inequities that you're seeing digitally speaking? You know, whether that's technology-wise, and then maybe even from an equity-deserving group perspective, where are you seeing the most inequity? And what do you think the city's role should be in addressing that?
Thank you for that question. So in our literature review, which was granted not only focused on Calgary, but it was looking more on, in general, the equity-deserving groups that are impacted by the digital divide, like in a global context, actually. But it also applies to Calgary and was incorporated into the digital equity strategy from the city as well. It's really that actually income is like the single biggest factor, in the sense that it is really like, if you look at the different income groups, and how accessibility changes so much. With income then comes, of course, also other aspects. So in this moment, for example, I had, for example, mentioned a single parent, elderly who might be on fixed income, maybe people with impairments or who might not be able to work and rely also on fixed income. So in the end, income. So what the city can do, that's a good question. So what we are seeing is that we have lots of programs and funds available even on the federal level. So we have, for example, the Universal Broadband Fund, we have the CRTC Fund. So it's not that the federal government and also provincial, territorial, and municipal governments are not aware of these challenges. And indeed, a lot of millions of dollars are really being invested into, you know, trying to close the digital divide. But maybe it's still, you know, missing the mark a little bit. So what we are finding is that there really needs to be very strong collaboration between all orders of government. So municipalities needing to be able to communicate their needs to the federal government, to the provincial government. and there just needs to be collaboration and coordination also of efforts, because sometimes it could even happen that the federal government is not even aware of all the challenges that exist across the municipalities. And of course, in Canada, we are talking about, we have the urban centers with their own challenges, and then we also have rural and remote and northern communities. And so all these different needs and perspectives and experiences, they need to be incorporated into these programs. But of course, it is very challenging because policy often, you have one strategy or one policy or one program that is supposed to fix all problems. It doesn't work like that. So yeah. Anything else? Anybody else?
Nailed it. And I think the other thing to keep in mind is that it's compounding. So income is one piece. When we look at the digital divide, we look at all sorts of aspects of it. So do you have the technology skills to connect? Do you have the funds? Are you capable? Do you have an internet connection there? Is it affordable connection? Do you have the device that you need? So from a technology perspective, it's multifaceted, but it does really, Katarina was integral in building that research, doing that research and writing a paper, which is available. And we have a one-pager in the School of Public Policy that's come out as well. But it really does look at, there are these overarching problems that heavily impact the digital divide as well. And income is the primary one of that.
Any last comments from the panel? We'll just wrap things up because we're almost at time here. If anyone has any last comments. Thank you, everybody who tuned in online, and thank you for the questions here in person. It's really appreciated. I think we've really been able to illustrate today, and I appreciate the panelists really speaking to that digital divide and what Calgarians and people are experiencing with it, and some of the work that we're doing to try and help those people who are living that experience right now. We're just going to be breaking off stream side now and then kind of breaking into more networking and discussion here in person starting up next. So I welcome everybody to hang around. And for those of you tuning on online, feel free to connect with any of us in the panelists if there's anything that you have for questions or ideas or areas to support. As everyone was saying, a lot of it is this collaboration and it's working together to really address where those digital divide pieces are. I know myself working on the digital divide, it's taking a lot of advocacy and communication, and even just in your personal lives, if you see where there is a skills gap or something that exists, speak up and make sure that that is addressed, because each person's lived experience is their own individual, and those people need to be able to communicate or have other advocates be able to communicate what their needs are. So again, thank you, everybody. Really appreciate it, and I hope everybody enjoys the rest of their day here.